Seems like everyone on the internet is talking about Kari Barker's obsession, and as a self-proclaimed feminist, I wanted to see what the hype was about. However, as soon as I started scrolling on TikTok to get an idea of this film before I watched it, I was immediately barraged with a ton of bizarre videos made by men talking about this film, making jokes about it, and it made me really confused as to what the actual film was about. And upon watching the film, I was pretty horrified to see that people were making these like really tasteless jokes about it, and also the way that people were misinterpreting the film. So let's discuss the misinterpretations of this film and the actual context of this film together. Now, I do want to put some content warnings in here because we're going to be discussing some quite serious themes such as SA, and also talking about body autonomy, talking about issues to do with men taking advantage of women. So if these are things that you find really difficult to watch, I would not recommend watching this film. I would not recommend watching this video, and I will see you in the next video. My personal take on this film is that I think it is an excellent film. I think that, people saying, oh, I don't believe that it's feminist because a man wrote this. Personally, I do disagree. I think that men can write excellent pieces of feminist literature, of feminist media, and this film is a great example. And whilst it might seem at first glance, Obsession is a film about how a wish for love can go horribly wrong for a young man, it is very easy to realize quite early on that the film has a lot more layers to it, and it is not Nikki who is obsessed, it is actually Bear. And the obsession that the title implies is Bear's obsession with having a control over Nikki's agency and her independence and freedom. Now, the main themes that we see in this film are stolen autonomy, consent, and male entitlement. And the entire film's premise is around Nikki's autonomy being stolen by Bear because he wants her to be his girlfriend, and therefore he ignores all of her actual feelings and emotions in order to get this wish. Now, of course, in the beginning, I went into this movie not knowing anything about it. I honestly went into this film without really reading much because I knew I wanted to kind of like have my own opinions, and I'm really glad that I did do that. So when I went into this movie, I really did expect to feel unsympathetic towards Bear, but I did genuinely feel quite sorry for him in the very early parts of the film. His cat passes away, and he seems to be suffering with what looks like a really deep depression or something similar. And at first I thought he seems like someone who is quietly sensitive and sort of thoughtful. However, even this early on in the film, there are clues that you might not notice. The fact that his cat passes away because he is negligent with leaving medications out, and therefore the cat takes these medications and overdoses and passes away. And examples such as him cleaning the cat up in a plastic bag, which, as an animal lover, I would never do that. If one of my animals passed away, I would give them a proper burial. So it just feels a bit misplaced considering he supposedly loves this cat so much. And we get a really uncomfortable crying scene of him after his cat dies, despite the fact that he gave it quite an unceremonious burial. So already we kind of see the way that he treats beings that he cares for. He doesn't necessarily have a lot of respect for them despite loving them. When we see Bear's house, I feel like the set design for this movie is excellent because it really does represent his mood. It's dark, gloomy, and there's not a lot of life in there. And since reading up about the film after watching it, I also was able to realize that this house actually belonged to his grandma, so he's already living in the shadow of a woman who loved him and took care of him, and he doesn't really make an effort to take care of himself after this. And, being a sympathetic person with empathy, I did still feel bad for him, but at the same time, as a grown human, as an adult, we do need to learn how to take care of ourselves and be able to get ourselves out of these hard situations. And so seeing him kind of wallow in his self-pity instead of trying to improve himself or get better, it just kind of expects that she should be with him because he feels like he kind of deserves her, is kind of a scary rhetoric. And it's definitely something that we have seen in incel forums and modern day dating culture, when men feel like they are entitled to women's affection. And this is where the male loneliness epidemic really does tie into this film, because we can see that he's lonely, but not to sound harsh, but it's almost self-inflicted because he's in this really big house that he owns. He could definitely invite his friends over. He could do more with it. He could definitely do something with his life. He seems like someone who's got a very promising life ahead of them. But instead, he chooses to kind of wallow in this situation, and it's difficult to watch. When we're introduced to Nikki as a character, she just seems like a really kind person. And the beginning of the film starts with Nikki saying she wants to go home early because she's tired, and Bear offers to drive her home. Which again is kind of like him, first of all, trying to come across as chivalrous. He's trying to do a nice thing, which I don't really see a problem with. But at the same time, it's also him trying to kind of get a chance to ask her out, which I get. I mean, I guess if you get a chance, but at the same time, if someone's saying they're tired and they want to go home, I think anyone with any kind of normal human social cues would say maybe this is not the right time to ask this girl out because she's clearly tired and she just wants to go home and rest. But that is not how he sees it. And it is through Bear feeling entitled to Nikki that we see the framing of loneliness as an epidemic being unique to men, which is overlooking the fact that women are socialized to cultivate emotional resilience. Now, things change when Bear decides to take his friend's advice. He basically is like, okay, I'm just going to go for it. And he tries to use different ways to get her to kind of like flirt with her, which goes disastrously wrong. Even I think one of his friends gives him advice to kind of like make fun of her, which is what a lot of guys do when they're trying to like impress a girl, which again, that is not going to work. I will give you guys some advice. Do not be mean to people if you want them to like you. That's not going to work. But yeah, it didn't work. And he got really upset because he's like, I've tried to flirt with this girl and it didn't work. So of course he's like, damn it, my chance. And in a moment of pure grief, he ends up snapping the One Wish Willow that he bought when he was going to buy a present for Nikki, and he ends up wishing that she would love him more than anyone else in this world. Now, it's important to note that when he bought this One Wish Willow, he was originally going to buy a present for Nikki. And when I saw this scene, I thought it was really sweet because I was like, oh, he's gone out of his way to go to a crystal shop that she would like and buy her a customized present. Like, that sounds really genuinely nice. But the fact that when he goes to this crystal shop, he doesn't end up buying her anything she would like. He doesn't get her the necklace to replace her old necklace. He doesn't get her any present. He gets something for himself. And that kind of shocked me because I thought that's a really selfish thing to do. And not that he owes her a present, but if you're going to buy someone a present, surely you would buy them something. I don't know. It was just such a weird scene. And again, I think that shows kind of like insights into his character early on that we kind of have to pick up as subtle cues to the type of person that he is. He doesn't necessarily see it as a bad thing to be buying the One Wish Willow instead of a present for her, but he definitely thinks, oh, this would help me. And he's thinking about himself even when he's buying a present for her. And one of the shop staff suggests him buying a crystal. I believe the crystal they suggested was citrine, which I own a citrine crystal. I think they're amazing. It's a very beautiful crystal and it has a lot of healing properties. And he immediately is like, oh, she wouldn't like that. So he doesn't really seem to know her as a person because he seems to think she'd like nothing instead of a really nice crystal. And another thing that I want to note is that he is constantly blaming her for his actions. Even in the beginning, when he makes this wish, he immediately tells her that he thinks she took some sort of drug or something and that's why she's acting the way that she is. Which again, at first I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, he doesn't know that this One Wish Willow would actually work, right? But the fact that he is blaming her so quickly is kind of alluding to a deeper problem he has. And it's kind of like a thinly veiled metaphor, if it even is one, for victim blaming. It is literally just victim blaming. So something that I personally find really creepy about this story is that when the switch up happens and Nikki becomes the Wish Nikki, which is essentially a different entity from normal Nikki herself. Wish Nikki is a version of Nikki created by the One Wish Willow when Bear makes this wish, which is essentially like a version of her that mirrors his feelings about her. So it's a very obsessive, creepy personality that locks away her original feelings. And one of the things that I really like about this entity is that we don't 100% see the normal Nikki getting thrown away. She comes back during certain moments and it is unbelievably terrifying to see her come back because we see moments where she's screaming in agony over the fact that she has no control over her body. She's crying about it. It's genuinely distressing to look at. One of the scenes that I find probably the worst for this was when he initiates intimacy with her and you can see that she's kind of frozen and he, keeps going and he doesn't really see a problem with it because he's just considering how he feels. And the way that Nikki is reacting, we have the Wish Nikki talking, which is kind of this like pretending to enjoy it type of voice, and we have the real Nikki in her face, kind of looking frozen and horrified. And this to me was one of the most horrifying scenes I have ever seen in a horror movie. It was so triggering to watch that I actually had to turn this off and go for a walk, because I was like, I can't watch this. This is genuinely distressing. Probably one of the most accurate portrayals of SA that I have seen in a film. And that's what makes this so haunting, is that it is very accurate at certain times despite being a dramatized horror film. One of the other most horrifying scenes that we get in this film is when Nikki is waiting for him to come home, and instead of going about her day, you know, doing other stuff, kind of just behaving like any normal person would, she stands in one spot, completely still, smiling, waiting for him to come home, because the entity that has taken control over her, the Wish Nikki, does not know anything but being obsessed with this man.
Perhaps in some ways this mirrors our societal expectation of what a woman should do when she's at home and her boyfriend or partner is not there. Because what are we expecting her to do? To cook and to clean when he's not there, to be the perfect girlfriend? I think that the film is aware of that. Because in order for her to give up her body autonomy entirely, which she has been forced to do with Bear's wish, she has to also give up the things that he doesn't think about.
And that is so unbelievably creepy to me. The fact that she ends up actually soiling herself and being sick because she hasn't eaten, and he comes back and it's a horrifying sight to look at. And to me, it is just so horrifying that this is what she goes through, and he still thinks, oh, let's just get you cleaned up, it's fine. He still seems to think it's fine. And there's a bunch of other crazy stuff she does in this film. Because of this wish, this is really just the cherry on top when it comes to situations in this film. So I do recommend that you watch it if you haven't already. But this is one of those scenes that really stood out to me, because it's just so heartbreaking how anyone could do that to someone, where you can see that she's clearly suffering so much. And obviously towards the end of the film, she ends up taking this out on other people. She ends up ending the lives of multiple people. If you guys have watched, that's what happens. And it's very creepy, but I think it's fascinating equally how even when he has this version of her that is so utterly devoted and obsessed with him, he still goes after the other girl. And he still goes after Sarah, who shows interest in him, 2 a.m. in a car. And then Nikki ends up mirroring his obsession with Sarah by dressing as Sarah after ending Sarah's life, which is so interesting to me because it shows that he never truly loved Nikki. I mean, obviously, from all his actions, that's pretty obvious, right? But it shows he was just obsessed with her, and it was all just a way to kind of try and get social points, I think, because he saw her as a very beautiful woman. And this is something that I think a lot of women, we do have to be aware of, is if you are deemed as attractive, if you're seen as beautiful, you will be seen as a prize, something to be obtained by men. And that's something that I find really upsetting, is that your personality, kind of like your sense of humor, these are all things that are secondary characteristics. Men will focus on how you look and how you appear to other men, how having you on their arm makes them look like the powerful one. It makes them look like someone who is worthy, because they base their entire worth off of having a pretty woman by their side. And you'd be surprised how many men think like this.
We see Nikki idealized in the early parts of the film as the Stacy character trope. According to the incel ideology, she is beautiful, and therefore that means she's only interested in a very small amount of men. Regardless of how she actually feels, this is forced upon her with the wish. And we see Sarah being forced into the role of the Becky, where she is pitted against Nikki just because she has feelings for Bear, and ultimately is made to suffer because of it.
It becomes very obvious with this film that Nikki's agency is an obstacle for Bear to overcome. He basically sees her agency as a nuisance. For example, when he calls up the phone for the One Wish Willow company and he says, how do I change my wish? He doesn't want to cancel the wish, he wants to change it. And when they say, oh, do you want to hear Nikki through the phone, in this fantasy kind of made up call, he hears the real Nikki screaming in pain through the phone, and he just ignores it. He ignores it. And another example is when Nikki is asleep, the kind of like fake Nikki, the wish Nikki, is asleep. And then real Nikki comes through and is speaking in her sleep saying, please, could you just end my life? And he says, oh, what's so wrong with being with me? His first thought is always about himself. His first thought is always about, how do I get her? And I don't care about her kind of like consent. I don't care about her autonomy. He only cares about having her. I feel like I've been watching a lot of movies and playing a lot of games that have to do with female kind of like psychology and talking about how women are treated in media. And it did remind me a lot of Jennifer's Body, which is one of my favorite films. I'm going to be discussing that film a bit more in detail for another movie review that I'm doing next week on Sucker Punch, which you guys can just wait to see that one. But the theme of wanting to have a woman and not caring about what you do to hurt her and to destroy her life is so terrifyingly common in our society that men would rather do anything that they can to get over a woman's agency in order to have her. And I don't think that he ever truly had her because she says, I was never yours. She never was. And it's the same in Sucker Punch. We see the same line used where she says, you never had me. You'll never have my mind. And I really love when films say this because I think men don't understand that you can't own a woman. You don't own people. You can't own a woman's mind. You can say you own her body by objectifying her and using her, but you're never going to fully own her. You never will. And that's something that I think frustrates men, which is terrifying. But I also think it's quite a freeing feeling for women to think no matter what these horrible people could do to you, you still own yourself. You still are your own person. And with Nikki, what makes it so terrifying is that part of her, her mind, is shut away. So she can't even retreat into her mind because she's stuck there to begin with. She doesn't have that safe space that most of us have. And that is something that I think makes the movie so well done. And it's what I really commend Kari for doing. So we're going to watch some TikToks on other people's impressions of this movie and react to them together because I'm so curious on what the public consensus of this movie is. And it seems like a lot of men interpret this movie as being kind of like about crazy girlfriends, which is insane to me. That is an insane take. So we're going to watch one of those takes together. And fair enough, this could be rage bait, but there are genuinely thousands of people who liked this video and agree with it and who have made similar videos. So we're going to watch this together.
That movie, if you are a woman, you cannot actually experience it. It's like a guy trying to understand Taylor Swift. It's not fucking possible. You have to be the
So, okay, so the first thing he says is that if you're a woman, you can't actually experience this film, which obviously I disagree with because I've already said I think the fact that a man directed this is not a problem to me. I think that men can still empathize with women who've gone through issues with body autonomy. I think that male directors can still make films about these dark topics. So I still think women can understand this film. And I don't really understand what he's trying to say by this. In fact, it feels like he's saying that women don't understand the fact that men are misinterpreting it, which is true. I can't understand how you can watch this film and side with Bear, who has caused this poor woman to be assaulted and go through all of this trauma for no reason.
correct gender in order to comprehend it. So
yeah, and this is where I wonder if he is rage baiting because saying the correct gender is a crazy thing to say. There is no such thing as a correct gender. There's more than two genders, mind you. I feel like every time I have these conversations about men and women, I need to remind people that gender is a social construct. Like there are people who are non-binary, there are people who don't identify as male or female. I don't know. It's a very divisive topic, and I honestly just think it's very stupid. And it's always men like this bringing this up. It's just very dumb, in my opinion, because anyone can understand and empathize with this movie.
girls don't understand obsession. They walk in and they think it's a good movie. Oh my god, that was so good. Meanwhile,
yeah, and his interpretation of women saying, oh my god, that was so good. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's a good film. It is a good film. I don't see why there's a problem with a woman saying it's a good film, because it is. Like, isn't that just an opinion? Like, common sense? I don't know. So that was kind of one of the takes that I saw men having, and I saw a ton of men kind of talking about how they want a crazy girlfriend like Nikki. There seems to be a lot of talking points. And I don't find that funny. You know, you can call me too woke. I get that all the time. That doesn't really bother me. I don't find it funny to joke about how you want a crazy girlfriend, because this girl literally was by this man. So if you think that that is desirable, I genuinely worry for you, sanity-wise. I do want to say, like, men who view crazy or mentally ill women, which I've talked about before, and I'm also going to talk about this when I make my Sucker Punch video, so please, if you want to see that film, please, in the comments below, talk about it, because I need some hype for my next videos, please, thank you. But yes, I will be discussing that in more detail in that film review. But I feel like a lot of it comes from the control element. It comes from the fact that girls with mental illness, speaking from personal experience, seem easier to control, easier to abuse. And that's why a lot of men are attracted to it, because they think, oh, this person is vulnerable. And they're attracted to that vulnerability. Now, I think it's pretty common sense that I think anyone should know that being attracted to someone just because they are mentally ill is a pretty evil and manipulative way to think. I would never be attracted to someone just because they have a certain mental illness. Like, that's crazy. Something that I really, really love that Curry does in this film, which again shows how good his filmmaking is that he does make you sympathize with Bear. You do feel sorry for him at times. Not a lot of the time, especially if you rewatch it. I think you're probably going to be not sorry for him at all. But in the beginning, when you watch this film, and it does make me really think that media literacy is at an all-time low, because I have seen men saying, oh, this film is about crazy girlfriends. It's about how certain women act. I side with Bear. And that is just a sign of poor media literacy. Now, of course, when it comes to films, we can all interpret them in different ways. It's up to you how you interpret it. I'm just sitting here offering my opinion. It is just my opinion, right? And I feel like because of incel culture, because of today's culture with dating and entitlement, a lot of people forget that actually this is a very feminist plot. This story is inherently very feminist. Just because awful things happen to Nikki doesn't mean that we condone those things. It doesn't mean that they're good things to happen to her. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The story is sympathetic towards Nikki. We feel awful for her. We really sympathize with her. And I think one of the things I also read about was that a lot of screenings of this film, when it came to the essay scene, which you guys, if you've watched the film, you'll know this scene, as I mentioned it, people were laughing in the audience. And not just men, women too. And I wonder if maybe that was uncomfortable laughter, if people were so uncomfortable watching the film that they were like, yeah, I have to laugh because I can't deal with it, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I'm like, if there's people who really find this funny, that's crazy to me. That you would find a scene about assault funny. So now we're going to watch a TikTok that I agree with to kind of talk about some other people's really interesting interpretations of this film, because there are some men who've posted some incredible takes about this film. So let's watch this one.
Obsession isn't even about men obsessing over women who don't like them. Obsession is about males' fascination and obsession with controlling women's bodies entirely. Bear does not wish for himself to become the type of person.
Okay, this is a really great point that he says, that Steven says, which, by the way, props to Steven, because I was watching some of his TikToks and, oh my gosh, he has some great takes. So here he says obsession is actually about the obsession that men have with controlling women's bodies, which I 100% agree with. I think that there is this kind of hyperfixation on how to get women to behave, and it's very, very creepy. But we see this a lot in the kind of trad wife community. We see this a lot in the incel community. It's all connected. I've been saying this, and this is one of the reasons why I am so openly political on my platforms, because this is what incel men, this is what kind of extremist men want. So it's very, very scary.
That Nikki would like. He wishes to absolutely control her world.
Which is true, because ultimately, if you wanted someone to like you, it would be a much more constructive wish to wish, hey, make me their ideal type. And imagine if you didn't change at all, then you'd be like, oh my god, I was their type all along. That'd be so cute. Off topic, wouldn't that be so cute? But anyway, he doesn't wish to be her ideal type. He wishes for her to change for him. Isn't that so telling and very misogynistic?
And then he's upset and selfish when it doesn't turn out to be this magical thing. So this film is really about bodily autonomy. It's about essay. It's about...
Yeah. The fact that he wishes to control her entire world. I mean, the fact that he doesn't care about her career. He doesn't care about the fact that she has friends and family. He doesn't seem to care about any of that. The whole movie, she's just at his house and following him around. And the fact that he thinks that's okay is crazy to me.
Men in situations of power who make sweeping decisions about what women can and can't do with their bodies, not even thinking about the
And here's another great point that he makes. It's about men in positions of power who make decisions about what women can and can't do. Does that sound familiar to you right now? With the US government? With the views on abortion? So you can't tell me that media isn't political. You can't tell me. Everything is connected. I've been saying this. Everything is connected. You wonder why places like Turning Point USA are trying to get women to retract their rights, to retract their right to vote. They're trying to make that a normal statement to have a household vote. This is all connected. It's all connected about trying to control and police women so that men can get what they want and control women's bodies and women's rights and women's autonomy to be free. So my overall opinion on what makes Bear such an evil character is that he doesn't see himself as evil. He could be any guy that we know. He could be any man in our lives as a woman. He thinks that because he has unrequited love, he is allowed to be entitled to having that woman. And we realize it's not even love that he has, it's just obsession. And he still prioritizes his feelings over Nikki's in every scenario. He still thinks that he's owed her time, he's owed her attention. He kind of seems to enjoy this kind of craziness over him, as, for example, when he goes to the party and Nikki confronts Sarah about sitting next to him, he seems to kind of enjoy the interaction they have. He gets like a little Jenga block that says like, kiss the person. Is it on your left or on your right? I think it's on left. And instead of not reading that out, he could have just put it back. He decided to read it out because he kind of wanted that drama. He wanted the attention because he's prioritizing his own feelings, his own ego, owning Nikki, having Nikki as his girlfriend, showing off to everyone that she's his girlfriend over her actual feelings, because he sees Nikki as a concept. He doesn't see her as a human being. The fact that she's a writer, the fact that she's very clever, she's very emotionally intelligent, doesn't really seem of interest to him. He's only really interested in how she looks and how she acts and how she is perceived by other men. He sees what the kind of social status he would have if he has a girl like her with him, and he wants that. So it seems like Obsession is a film that a lot of people are also using to kind of like decide if someone is a good partner or not, because if the man reacts by thinking that Obsession is about crazy girlfriends, they say he's a bad boyfriend, and if he reacts by understanding it, they're like, oh, he's a green flag. And I'm worried by this, because if media literacy is honestly to the point where it's someone who could either tell essay or not essay, then we are seriously in trouble, because that is a dangerous place to be in society. But considering that, again, a lot of this is to do with American politics, American culture right now, like I said before, America is currently facing a serious issue when it comes to women's rights. The UN has reported that we are in a national crisis, a worldwide crisis for women's rights. Every country is dealing with this. It's a serious problem. And so I think films like this are super important when it comes to reminding us why women need autonomy. Because the fact that we now have states in America where abortion is illegal and women are having to go and get 3 different tests to prove that their child is unborn in order to have an abortion is honestly insane. Like, we are living in the dark ages. Like, I cannot believe that this is a reality. And it affects all women, because we also see transgender women who are having their license plates revoked, their professional documents revoked if they don't have their birth name on it, which again is so horrific and insulting for them to go through. So this film, to me, is an excellent piece on why we need to be prioritizing women's rights and women's safety. And when it comes to dating, you don't know anyone anything. I've said this so many times about the male loneliness epidemic. It is self-inflicted. If you are lonely, you need to try and change that, because when it comes to women, historically, women have always been really good at making communities. We've always been really good at making clubs, hanging out together, spending time together. That is something that I think a lot of women are really good at. And I think it's something that, because of the patriarchal society that we live in, men tend to find a bit harder. And I'm not necessarily trying to insult men for that, because I think sometimes it is literally how you're brought up in society. But I do think when it comes to loneliness, you shouldn't be just relying on getting a romantic partner. You need friends, you need family, you need other people in your life. And there are ways to make friends, to make families, to have like self-made families and friendship groups. You can go to clubs, you can go to sports events, you can even do gaming tournaments, things like that. There are so many ways to build a community, and to try and create a community like what Bear does in this movie by simply controlling a woman and making her your entire sense of self is so dangerous and harmful. And that's why I really love this film, because it tackles on so many themes. It tackles on the theme of male entitlement, feeling like they deserve women's bodies. It tackles on the male loneliness epidemic. It taps into the issue with incels and what incels are doing to women. And it also really makes agency such an important talking point. It really does feel like we are looking at someone who is just trying to control a woman. And that is the most sexist thing you can do. So I guess after finishing the film, I really didn't have any sympathy for Bear left. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen this film. How did you react to it? Did you feel sympathetic to him? How do you feel about the story itself? Do you think it's a good story? Do you think it's a feminist story? I would be so curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And as I said, I am really looking forward to finishing my script for my video about Sucker Punch. I think it's such an interesting film. And if you like this review, I think you're really going to like that review. So please do give me a like, a thumbs up, whatever you want to call it, and comment. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to subscribe because we're almost at 30k, so I would be super happy to reach 30k by the end of this month, if possible. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. And yes, it is super dark right now. It's probably a bit creepy. Am I giving like horror movie vibes? I don't know. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys very soon.